90% of Kenyans have rejected this bill. 90%. And the majority of all those who submitted their memos have also rejected this bill. Mr. Speaker, it's for a very simple reason. And the reason is this. Excessive
Mr. Speaker, I stand on, we have a responsibility to, is it, no, wait, calm down. I stand on standing order number 95A, and I want to know whether Honorable Otiende Omolo, with all due respect, when he says and stands on national TV, here in Parliament, where we are broadcasting live, and says that 90% of Kenyans are opposed to this bill, what statistics has he laid on this table to say that he has done a research and found out that 90%, because, 90%, Mr. Speaker, is mathematics. These are numbers, and numbers do not lie. You must be responsible of the statement that you place on this table. So, Mr. Speaker, please, let him substantiate where he has gotten the figures of 90% from.
Proceed, Otiende Omolo.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that objection is symptomatic to the problem this side is having. They don't listen to the radio stations, they don't read the printed media, they don't watch TV stations. If they did, they would not ask that question. Let me continue, Mr. Speaker.
Otiende Omolo,
Mr. Speaker.
Otiende Omolo, you are normally more balanced than that. Kagombe cannot be the side. He's an individual.
Speaker, I'll proceed. Yes. Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making is that excessive and generalized overtaxation of Kenyans will only further burden Kenyans who are already suffering. The cost of living is so high, and therefore it's a lie to say that you want this budget to pass in order to alleviate the suffering of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, I wish to submit that there are only three answers to the problems we have right now. One, austerity measures. Two, reduction of corruption. And three, rationalization of government. Mr. Speaker, I do not understand how a government that says that already there's a problem insists on increasing the overall budget from 3.3 trillion, which it was in the previous year, to 3.67 trillion, if you admit there's no money. What is the principle? If you have no money, you cut your coat according to size. So you don't say that you must increase it and therefore you must overtax. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, how does a government that says we are short of money explain why you must create offices that we do not need? You do not need the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary. You do not need all the 24 cabinet offices. The Constitution allows you a minimum of 14. You do not need over 51 principal secretaries. You do not need over 50 CSs. And all these are taking public money. If you say, and it is unfortunate that a member of parliament should seek to mislead the public by saying that members of parliament already get money for houses, that is not true, because it is a loan that we pay at 3%. But if that is your position, then take away that free house, because we don't have it. Don't tax Kenyans on it. Mr. Speaker, corruption. In all these words, the word anti-corruption you will never hear from the words of those who speak for the government side. In fact, you only see the demonstration of those who are facing corruption charges being withdrawn. It is on record from the previous president that we lose 2 billion shillings every day to corruption. If we could even just reduce that to 1 billion, we would fix the gap that they are talking about in government. Then there's rationalization, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you are aware, and this House has debated, in the previous parliament, there was a report that suggested that we do not need the over 530 ministries and departments of government that we have, the parastotals. Most of them are duplicative. And it was suggested that we should reduce them to barely 50. Instead of reducing them, we have a situation where we are sustaining even those which were moribund, those which were not working. We are giving opportunity to others to earn a living. Mr. Speaker, as I finish, Mr. Speaker, my 2 minutes were taken. Can I get my 2 minutes back, please? My 2 minutes. Yes. Mr. Speaker, 2 closing remarks. You must listen to us, because even if you use the majority to pass this, there's still the courts. And even if you deal with the courts, there's still the people who are sovereign. Two things. One, you cannot have a situation where you are bringing the housing tax here. I want to invite you to note, first of all, that under Schedule 6, the role of housing is for the counties, it's not for the national government. And I invite you to look at Clause 8D. The national government is only to do the housing policy. So when you are bringing the question of housing and you're introducing the tax, you're actually amending the constitution through the back door. And it also means then that this bill should go to the Senate, because the Senate must have a role in anything that affects the counties. And that is a point that you need to bear in mind. Lastly, it is a matter of the constitution that you cannot introduce servitude. By telling someone that they must pay tax, which will not benefit them and will go to the shareholders, as your leaders have told us, that is servitude. Servitude that we must reject, and we must reject this bill in totality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Amolo. Members, before I give the next speaker, allow me to acknowledge the following institutions in the public and speakers gallery. Tender Care School, Embakasi East, Nairobi. Ontulilu Boys School, Buri, Meru. Moi Girls High School, Nairobi, Kibra. Sitam Schools, Makadara. Kongoi Secondary School, Kuresoi North, Nakuru. Mary Emase.
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity to contribute to this motion on the finance bill. Honorable Speaker, this is a very important bill, and members, I want to urge that we debate soberly and objectively, devoid of any emotions. And secondly, Honorable Speaker, as we discuss the finance bill, we cannot discuss the finance bill in isolation. We need to look at the entire equation holistically. Look at the budget and look at the finance bill. And I'm happy that members agree that we must raise money to finance the budget. And that is what the finance bill is all about. It proposes measures to raise money to finance the budget. So when I listen to members say that this bill does not in any way improve or should be rejected, and I look at you and I wonder, did you listen to the discussion on the budget and where we are proposing to distribute this money to? So for me, Honorable Speaker, I want to say that we must make a decision. It is a hard decision, but this is our country. We live here, and we have to make it a better country. And therefore, we must make a decision. And the elephant in the house is the chairman of the budget has just reminded us on the figures, what our budget is. And we know how we borrowed heavily in the past, and that is what brings us to the state in which we are today. 60% of our revenue goes towards paying the loans that we owe. And therefore, we can decide to choose. We talk of subsidies to continue. We talk of less taxes. Yes, you can choose to go that direction. But the question you should ask yourself, for how long shall you be able to sustain the subsidies? And I hear people saying, when we reduce taxes and we continue to give subsidy, we attract more investment, and then the country is able to grow. I want to ask you, reducing taxes is just one of the factors, but there are so many other factors of production. You will need to provide accessibility, that's the road. You may need to provide electricity and many other factors. So it is not automatic by reducing taxes that we shall be able to spur growth and improve things. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to say on this finance bill, as I support it, that I support the position by Kenya Kwanza, that we need to raise more taxes ourselves as a country and borrow less, so that by doing that, we are able to actually allocate money to core sectors of the economy. In fact, the question we should be asking ourselves are questions on accountability, are questions on austerity measures, are questions on how do we fight corruption, so that together we are able to raise them. And that is why we saw in our budget that we are allocating money to go to the sectors like agriculture, so that we are able to increase production. And therefore, ultimately, the forces of demand and supply will help bring down the cost of goods and cost of living. We are putting money to sectors like digitization, industrialization, so that we're able to create employment opportunities for our children. So the finance bill in entirety is not a bad thing. And Mr. Speaker, I want to support this finance bill. And I've listened to members contributing. I was expecting members will say, I do not like this is not for Kenya, and this is what I'm proposing. I want to commend Honorable Masara. It's only Honorable Masara who has said, this is bad, I propose, probably we shouldn't have done A, B, and C. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the committee. It has not been easy. They have tried. And in particular, I see they have listened to Kenyans. They are proposing some reductions, like on the 3%. They're reducing it to 1.5. Probably the only thing I would want to request the chair as he replies to expound more on the difference between moving from mandatory contribution to a levy. And also, when you look at clause 76, that was clause 76. So when you look at clause 36, they have also proposed to remove the 20% mandatory deposit for those companies or individuals that were seeking who had issues with the tax payments or taxes that are being demanded. That was demanded that they needed to pay deposit in court. So,
thank you, Honorable Mary Mase. Member for Kaloleni. Kaloleni, Katana. Kahindi, Katana.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipatia
your constituency, honorable member.
Muda huu. Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipatia muda huu niweze kuchangia kwa mswada huu wa kifedha wa mwaka 2023. Mimi napinga mswada huu kwa yale yafuatayo. Bwana Spika, gharama ya maisha imepanda kiwango kikubwa zaidi, na gharama hizi hazijui ni nani yuko upinzani na ni nani yuko ndani ya serikali. Tabu hizi tunazipata sote kama Wakenya. Bwana Spika, ukiangalia ile nyongeza ambayo inataka kuwekwa kwa mafuta, ukiongeza ushuru kwa mafuta, kila kitu kinapanda, na anayeumia zaidi ni yule ambaye alikuwa akiongelewa: mama mboga, bodaboda, kwa sababu hakuna tofauti ya mama mboga na bodaboda na mbunge hata na rais. Kama ni bei ya mafuta, Bwana Spika, tunanunua lita moja kwa bei sawia. Bwana Spika, wakati serikali ilipoingia walisema gharama ya unga itashuka chini, wakasema gharama ya bidhaa muhimu zitashuka chini, lakini kufikia sasa, Bwana Spika, gharama zimepanda maradufu. Unajua kikwetu, Bwana Spika, utajua dalili za kwamba huyu bwana ana mbegu za kuzalisha, na kama hana utajua. Haina haja utangazie kila mtu. Yule babako ameketi pale nyumbani, Bwana Spika, akiona mkaza mwana ameanza kutema mate, anajua ni dalili kwamba kumefanyika kitu, anatarajia mjukuu. Lakini serikali hii ambayo ipo, hatuoni dalili za kutema mate, ni kutangaza kila siku bibi yangu ana mimba, na tukiangalia hatuoni ile mimba, ni kuhadaiwa. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, Ile tunasema ni kwamba serikali ilisema itahakikisha gharama za maisha zitashuka chini. Hapo sisi ndo tunasema, na mwananchi amesema hatuwezi kuongeza ushuru ili kufanya gharama ya maisha iende chini. Serikali inatakikana kuangalia yule mwananchi alikuwa anasema anamtetea, ili aweze kupata nafuu. Bwana Spika, sisi ambao tuko mashinani, hata wale wabunge ambao kwa serikali, imekuwa ni vigumu hata kwenda mashinani kuonana na watu, kwa sababu sisi wenyewe hela hatuna mifukoni. Tutawasaidia vipi wale watu wetu? Na hii dhana ya kusema kwamba ati wabunge wanapewa pesa za kununua nyumba, ule ni mkopo, tunakopeshwa na tunalipa na riba. Kwa hivyo mimi sahihi, Bwana Spika, unajua nimechukua mkopo wa nyumba na ninakatiwa katika mshahara wangu. Hii nyumba nalazimishwa kulala ni nyumba gani? Hii ingekuwa inakatiwa kwa hiari, yule ambaye anataka akatiwe alipe nyumba, yule ambaye yuko na nyumba afanye shughuli nyingine na zile pesa zake, aweze kufanya, aezekee ili aweze kuongeza biashara yake. Bwana Spika, ingekuwa vyema badala ya kupunguza ushuru wa nyumba wangepunguza ushuru wa mafuta, gharama ya maisha ingefanya nini? Ingeshuka chini. Lakini angalia ule bodaboda ambaye alikuwa akizungumziwa, na kama ni ahadi, serikali hii imeahidi vya kutosha. Serikali hii imeahidi vya kutosha, na kama ni kulaumu pia imelaumu vya kutosha. Kile tunachotaka sahihi ni kuhakikisha gharama ya maisha inarudi chini. Bwana Spika, tunapoenda mbele itakuwa ni vigumu hata ongezeko la watu kufanyika hapa nchini, kwa sababu wavulana hawana pesa ya kuoa, hawachipi.
Silvanos Osoro.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I want to support the report by the Finance Committee in regard to this finance bill. Honorable Speaker, I want to restrict myself to the housing thing. Honorable Speaker, I once asked my grandfather where he was when his peers were being allocated huge tracts of land, across the Gusii region. And he told me that at that point, it didn't matter to him, to own huge tracts of land, because he couldn't imagine that at some point population will grow. He couldn't imagine that at some point land will be inadequate. That is the challenge we are also facing as far as the housing matter is concerned. It is for that reason, Honorable Speaker, that today, even as a member of parliament, my house sits in a 50 by 100 piece of land. And that is my area in Gusii area. Because of the carelessness and the don't care attitude my forefathers had as far as land allocation is concerned. Honorable Speaker, it is prerogative of every government to think and create structures that define the future of a country. I get surprised, Honorable Speaker, that we are seated here just talking about matters of today, talking about matters of now, not imagining what will befall this country as populations grow day in, day out in another 20, 30 years. When members of parliament rise on their seats telling people that housing matter is not necessary, it is not a necessity, when we all know that it is important to have food, yes. It is important to have clothing, yes. But it's also important to have shelter. And that is what this government is talking about. And when you talk about importance of having food, this very finance bill has catered for that. And that is why we are talking about zero rating taxation on the farm inputs. In another few days or so, food production will be low in terms, the cost of food, cost of producing food will be low, food will be adequate, people will have a lot of energy, but they will not have shelter. And that is what we are saying today, Honorable Speaker, that it is important for us to pass this finance bill. As far as if there is nothing else that we need to be thinking about, then let's think about this housing thing. I imagine back in my area, and I keep saying this, that Gusii, Honorable Speaker, is turning to be a village slum. There is no land, but there are some pieces of land owned by government, and that is what you want to make use of. We are telling the members of the public that even as we think about today, in another 30 years or 20 or so, we'll need now to imagine the urbanization, because Kenya is largely urban in terms of, in nature. Everyone is moving urban. But now we are telling the people this way, that through this finance bill, you will be able to have structures built by government in your own sub-counties, so that in the inadequacy of land, it does not really affect you. Your people will have shelter. Because of the zero rating in terms of the farm inputs, your people will have food. Then people will live very okay. And that is the essence of the finance bill. But Honorable Speaker, listening to my colleagues from the minority side, and I listened keenly to Honorable Otiende Amolo, when he raised issue in terms of, cutting down the costs, the budget appropriation. But I get surprised, Honorable Speaker. We stayed here yesterday until 10 p.m. None of the members, not a single member of the minority was in this house to challenge the Committee of Supply when we were doing allocation, except Oluoch. It is in this house that we allocate and reallocate funds. If you wanted to cut down the budget, if you wanted to downsize the surplus of a certain particular...
Also be fair to Beatrice Elachi, she was here up to the end of time.
I stand guided, Honorable Speaker. Yes. I was, of course, with Beatrice Elachi and Honorable Oluoch. But all the rest were not here. You are talking about cutting down the budget as far as appropriation is concerned. That is a prerogative of this House. You were not here, Honorable Otiende Amolo. So who else do you want to cut down that budget if you are not here? You are complaining that we are, collecting money left, right, and center. But we passed that budget here. We passed the surplus here. It is a shame. It is a complete shame, Honorable Speaker. And it is important for Kenyans to know that the budget is pushed through your taxes. And that is what the essence of this finance bill is all about. The budget...
Give him 1 minute.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. It is through this finance bill that we're able to display where collection of money, collection of revenue is going to come from. When we passed the budget yesterday, we are justifying our collection, our source of income through this finance bill. So even as you challenge the finance bill, ask yourself, what element of this Committee of Supply did you challenge yesterday in the Committee of Supply? None. You are telling us to borrow. How do we borrow? To what extent can this country borrow? Do you want us to go to the Ghana way? How do you say that you are defending the content creators? But we've displayed to you, we've been able to reduce their taxation from 15%, to less than 10%. I mean, really, why do you want to play populist politics when you also need salaries? You know very well that your classes need to be built. Your road needs to be done. You are here shouting about CDF. Where do you want money to...
The Honorable Dr. Jackson Kosgei. Jackson Kosgei.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. On the onset, as I present my thoughts to this august House, I wish to say I support the motion. At independence, Mr. Speaker, our founding fathers had a conversation. Where do we take our newly independent countries moving forward? And the discussion they had was that we develop a philosophy not founded on the Western capitalism purely, or the Eastern socialism, but they looked at what they called an African democratic socialism. It had three thematics, Mr. Speaker, that we want to develop Africa with an equitable economic development. Second, they talked about an inclusive formation of our social structure. And they developed three strategic philosophies that informed our sessional paper 1965. They talked about that in this we need to build an economy, as they were addressing a financial bill like today, an economy that will promote a self-reliance, promote national unity, and also national development by pooling our resources. I am a son of a veteran war soldier in 1945. He told me when I caught polio that, son, now that you have lost your legs, you have a challenge. But let me tell you, you have no option but to improve upward. Never become a victim of paralysis by analysis. If we think Africa is poor and we continue to say we are poor, we will be paralyzed. We must look for a solution, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I wish to encourage us as leaders that we would like to be self-reliant as a country. And the best thing to do is to look at what we have to improve our nation. And therefore, I support this budget, which is bold, encouraging an African to be independent. Other details about how to elevate our situation has had some other mitigation given out in the country. So let us not send a message to the Kenyan people that we are done. We are not. We are able to rise up again after the Mr. Speaker. So I encourage this House, we support this bill without intimidating our own country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Kosgei. Peter Kaluma.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. Honorable Speaker, the main reason why parliaments exist in the world is on the doctrine that there can be no taxation without representation. And so I want to beg to remind both sides of the House that once this finance bill is passed, it will not be anybody. It will be you who taxed the Kenyans. And that is why you are elected directly by those Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, I have a problem with what is in clause 2 in terms of definition of person, and I know the chair for the committee is listening. My interpretation of what is in clause 2, if you read it together with section 26, subsection 5 of the Tax Act referred, includes everybody. Everybody, possibly in terms of the definition under that section 26, section 5, it includes your ancestors. And I fear if we don't look at it again, you will have a situation where in definition of person, you will be obligated to take over the tax obligations of your relative, including the dead one. So I want to request the Finance Committee to look at this as we proceed to the Committee of the Whole House. Honorable Speaker, I have an issue with what is at clause 36. And my view, Honorable Speaker, is that this would fundamentally deny people access to justice. Honorable members, particularly approaching elections, even in the last elections, Honorable Speaker, you remember when we were approaching, we were just hit with very big taxation claims, things we did not owe. The danger of clause 36,
Yes,
Honorable Speaker.
Order, Peter. Rahim, what is out of order? Give the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think Honorable Kaluma is misleading this House. He has not read the report. The committee has already proposed clause 36 to be deleted, what Treasury had proposed. So it has already been deleted. He should read the report. Thank you.
Honorable Kaluma.
I've read the report and they propose deletion. Until it is deleted and the House resolves so, it is part of the bill. And I want to encourage the committee
that if indeed there is a proposal to delete it, let it not suffer the fate of other proposals by committees which were dropped at the floor. Because the consequences otherwise, Honorable Speaker, would be grave. And I'm telling Honorable Dawood, a person will hit you with a taxation claim of over 2 billion or 20 billion approaching elections. And you know you will not get that tax clearance certificate if you have to deposit 20 or 200 million to then proceed to exercise your rights thereunder. So it will deny access to justice, which is a fundamental right. I would request that the committee, if indeed you have recommended, proceed and deal with it. Honorable Speaker, I have a concern with what is at clause 24. The clause 24 is talking about the increment in terms of income tax up to 35% for category of people. Honorable Speaker, I want the committee to consider those people in fixed term contracts, like state officers within this parliament. And I know you know who state officers within the institution of parliament are. Previously, Honorable Speaker, salary increment was a right to state officers within parliament, like all other employees under the Employment Act. But Honorable Speaker, when the terms were gazetted for some officers, particularly the members here, the annual salary increment was taken away. The consequence is that so many people under that arrangement went into their single-term contract without increment, and you know the fact of the matter is that we may be talking, but so many of us do not take any salary home. You've taken mortgages. When you are increasing to 35%, you would enter into arrangements you cannot renege on. Where are you going to get this money? And you know what a mortgage is. Where are you going to get the additional 5% to pay? When I know, just like me, I don't know the others, Honorable Speaker, but me, the newspapers have carried reports confirming I earn zero pay because of mortgage. And it is a contract you cannot rewrite after you go into it. Are we going to think of situations of those fixed term contracts without annual increment, or what measures are we talking about? Honorable Speaker, the issue of VAT on fuel has been spoken to. But the fact of the matter is that this will affect everybody. And Honorable Speaker, across the world, finance bills are negotiated. Honorable Speaker, in the last parliament, I remember the regime then, the Jubilee regime, wanted to move VAT to 16. And out of negotiations weighing the situation of the economy, we settled out of negotiations at 8%. I would request that, because this is going to affect so many other, the economic issues down there, we at the very worst leave it where it's at. Honorable Speaker, on the housing levy, Honorable Otiende brought the element of it being a county function. And I think we consider that seriously. But I wanted also to say something, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, in addition to the fact that this is a county thing, it is not defined clearly how you will benefit out of your contributions into this levy. And I think in as much as some people may want to push it, let us define. If it were not a tax, Honorable Speaker, it would define how you benefit. We are levied for NHIF, NSSF, and others, but you can benefit. How are you benefiting directly on this? If you are not, Honorable Speaker, I fear we may be going into violation of Article 40 on people's property rights. Honorable Speaker, there is an issue in clause 51. And I'm saying this, Honorable Speaker, because the chair is listening to me and the committee is there. The area of tax and amnesty, Honorable Speaker, is something we should delete from our laws completely. Honorable Speaker, there is a time I visited a commissioner in charge of taxation. And just on his desk there, a person who was to pay the country over 10 billion, the minister just wrote, pay 200 million or 2 million. And we lose all that money. We need to stop amnesty. And you should question, as members of this committee presenting this thing, why are we allowing amnesty up to 31st December 2022? Who are these we want to give amnesty to before we can enforce the law rightly? And it has been happening.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Finish your point.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, I would request that you look at that
if we are not having some fat cows to be, and I believe on taxation, nobody should be saved. Remove the idea of amnesty, let us go for people. And then lastly, Honorable Speaker, you know, each year, we lose over 700 billion to corruption in this country. Look at the budget for EACC and the agencies fighting corruption, which we passed yesterday. We cannot be debating in retrospect, but I'm thinking if we were able to save that money we are losing to corruption, your budget would be, in terms of what we need, some 2.1 trillion, and we would be having a lot of money to deal with. Honorable Speaker, the problem is that we have encouraged corruption. And then people we should be taking money from are being given amnesty. I request, Honorable Speaker, that we look at all those issues among the other issues raised by the members. And so long as those issues have not been looked into, Honorable Speaker, I stand to oppose.
Wakili Mureu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this opportunity to contribute to the finance bill. And Mr. Speaker, sir, first and foremost, I'd like to support this bill for the following reasons. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is an economic growth resuscitation bill. And why is it that? Because the interventions proposed by this bill, Mr. Speaker, is addressing the core of our economy. Mr. Speaker, sir, the finance bill is addressing on the debt level and how we can get out of that debt level. Currently, our debt level is at close to about 10 trillion. We spend over 60% of our collections to pay those debts. The second issue this bill is trying to address is unemployment. We have 6 million members of our youth who are qualified to be in employment, but sadly, they are there getting wasted. The other issue this bill is addressing is on the cost of living. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you are aware, the cost of unga is high, the cost of sugar is high, the cost of education is high, and yet, Mr. Speaker, sir, our people, even in all those circumstances, they want good roads, they want water, they want bursary for their children, they want to chase away darkness by having electricity. How else, Mr. Speaker, sir, are we supposed to address all those challenges by avoiding to pay taxes? Mr. Speaker, sir, my position is very simple. If you look at the provision on manufacturing, the finance bill has addressed clearly on the issue about our industries. And it's a sad story, Mr. Speaker, sir, because currently our manufacturing is only contributing 7.2% of our GDP. It is coming down from 9.2 a few years back. I know the manufacturers have an ambitious plan to raise that to about 30% in the next, by 2030, but that cannot be achieved if we do not protect our local manufacturers. And the way to support our local manufacturers is, number one, zero rate on the excise duty, especially on goods produced locally, but also put in a tax on the goods which are imported but which can be manufactured locally. For example, things like furniture, which come in from China and other countries, put excise duty on them. Goods like sugar, goods like iron and steel, which can be able to be manufactured locally. Because again, that's the only way we can be able to resuscitate our manufacturing. Number two, Mr. Speaker, sir, manufacturing support 40% of our employment. Today, as I said earlier, the biggest challenge is that we have highly educated young people, but they do not have employment. And the only way we can be able to address that is to ensure that we address the element of manufacturing, because that's the only way we can be able to place them in employment. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, sir, is about the issue of a digital economy. As you are aware, Kenya is one of the leading countries in terms of innovation economy. And being that the countries all around this, the Kenya, they look up to Kenya to just to copy what you are doing. Look at the way we have embraced the telephonic technology, the payment system, the lending system. The countries around in Africa, they are looking to Kenya as a shining star. But the question is, have Kenyans benefited from that bubbling economy? And that's why the proposal to put in a tax is for purposes of that industry to contribute to the nation, to contribute to the economy of this country, as we also along the way create employment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for that opportunity. And I support this bill.
Fatuma Jeho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I rise to oppose this bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that we are on an economic downturn. Our economic is collapsing. Mr. Speaker, today, if we were given this bill and none of us were a member of this honorable House, I can assure you none of us could have passed this bill. I say that, Mr. Speaker, because of few reasons. I'll start with the housing levy, Mr. Speaker. I've just looked at the report, and they are telling us they have proposed 1.5, Mr. Speaker. And looking at the report, they are telling us they are going to build 50,000 affordable housing. I would like to ask these honorable members and the chair of this committee, have you given us the timeline of this proposed affordable housing? What is the budget, Mr. Speaker? How many Kenyans are they going to be occupied in these 50,000 houses? Out of the 50 million Kenyans we have, I would like to take an example of a pay slip of a teacher or a police officer, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish I came with a pay slip of a teacher. These people are serving so many loans, Mr. Speaker. We are adding for them a housing levy of 1.5. How are they going to pay, Mr. Speaker? Our police officers are dying out of depression because of the loans they are paying. We cannot add for them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say collecting and taxing the citizens is not a bad thing. But it's not the right time for the people to be taxed. It has come the wrong time, Mr. Speaker. It's about our people, the people we represent, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to take this opportunity to talk to His Excellency the President. The people who are seated on the other side, Mr. President, are not passing this bill because they want it. They are doing this for you, Mr. President. Mr. Speaker, I want you to protect me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, history will judge us for passing this bill, Mr. Speaker. Let me go to manufacture. There is no point of order here, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we are debating the report on the Finance Committee.
No, we are
bill.
debating the finance bill. Give him the mic.
Honorable Speaker, it is not in order for the Honorable Fatma to impute improper motives on her colleagues as far as this House is concerned in terms of the debate. He's saying we want to please the President. Honorable Speaker, this bill is not owned by the President. It is owned by this House, Honorable Speaker. And she has an opportunity to support or oppose. And the majority will have their say. Minority will have their way. Minority will have their say. So it is wrong for her to impute improper motives on our colleagues and say we want to please the President. I mean, really, it's wrong. It's an insult to the colleagues. It's an insult. And she doesn't even come to the House.
Order. Fatuma, each member is here in their own right. So restrict yourself to the bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will continue by what I was saying, Mr. Speaker. I am here as the county MP for Wajir. I'll speak out my mind and I'll say what I think is right, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm here courtesy of the people of Wajir and I represent Kenyans equally, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to touch on the manufacturing. There is no doubt that the manufacturers are leaving Kenya, Mr. Speaker. Today's paper, we have seen the billionaires are leaving Kenyans. It has come to our attention. Most of us, we need to do something, Mr. Speaker. If you look at M-Pesa, right now the government is spying on our M-Pesa transaction, Mr. Speaker. We cannot even deposit 100,000 on our M-Pesa account because it's taxed, Mr. Speaker. Honorable members, we just need to put our foot down and just think, for heaven's sake, Mr. Speaker. It's not about which party you belong to.
What's your point of order? Give the mic to Honorable Kagombe. Yes, there you are.
Mr. Speaker, again, I rise on standing order number 91.1. And when you say, that is a very grievous accusation of the government, that the government is spying on Kenyans on M-Pesa. That is something that needs to be substantiated because this House has a responsibility to debate such a breach of privacy of Kenyans, and therefore the honorable member cannot just stand here and talk about it and move on. So we need to substantiate what you're saying. Number two, we are discussing the finance bill, Mr. Speaker. And this finance bill, Mr. Speaker, has got nothing to do with the issues that she's raising. That is an issue that she can come and she knows the way to raise such and address and such an issue to this House. A proper way of raising it through a motion or through a bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Fatuma, wind up. Your time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I talk on M-Pesa, I'm talking on technology, Mr. Speaker. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Speaker. I'll go to food security, Mr. Speaker. We are doing VAT fuel on 16%. Mr. Speaker, I just want someone to explain to Kenyans, when you impose 16% on fuel, how do you expect to secure food on this country? Everything depends on food, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I sit down, Mr. Speaker, sorry, I've been interrupted and I've forgotten a few things. Mr. Speaker, we need to earn the trust of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. We remember what happened, the Gulwana Kulalu project, the millions and the trillions shillings that were spent on that. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we need to trust, we need to get the confidence of the Kenyans.
Honorable Makilap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to state from the onset that I shall support this finance bill as a member of Finance Committee and as a member of Parliament for Baringo North. Mr. Speaker, there are puzzling events that has happened. Number one, yesterday we went close by close approving expenditure for the budget, knowing very well that this budget shall be financed through ordinary revenues and revenues that will be collected through this finance bill. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore very illogical to again, attack the same finance bill that tries to raise revenue to completely be able to finance the budget for this country. Mr. Speaker, we are all Kenyans. All of us here, regardless of which political divide you come from, in this particular budget that we passed close by close yesterday, has programs that are cuts across the Republic of Kenya. How then do we finance these programs if we don't finance using our own resources? Mr. Speaker, I am a believer of Kenya. I believe that this country shall be able to move to become one of the economies of Africa, strong economies of Africa. How did these countries that have succeeded be able to finance their programs? Mr. Speaker, We can never be able to develop this country using borrowed resources. Time has come that we must finance this country using our own resources by at least a little bit sacrificing for the nation. Mr. Speaker, we met some, in this finance committee, there were about 1,500 petitions. For the first time, Mr. Speaker, I sat for more than 20 days trying to listen to professionals of high caliber who argue from left, center, right on the issues that are raised in this finance bill, Mr. Speaker. And we as a committee, Mr. Speaker, had made some proposals, Mr. Speaker, and I wonder even my good friend Wandai did not read that we made a proposal that the issue of wigs, eyelashes, and everything were deleted. We made a proposal that this must be deleted to protect the hustlers of this country, because that clause, many Kenyans who came before us felt that this is a very bad clause. Mr. Speaker, we also on rental income, Mr. Speaker, being able to make a proposal to reduce from 10 to 7.5% so that the investors across the political divide who want to do projects on housing, Mr. Speaker, will be able to get value for their money. How else do we protect the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, when we reduced the housing levy from 3 to 1.5%, Mr. Speaker? We sat as a committee and be able to address the issues that were raised by Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, even including bringing in coffee. We made a proposal to zero rate export of coffee levy, Mr. Speaker. Coffee was not there, we brought in, there was only tea, zero rating on tea, but we brought in coffee because the Wanjigus of this country, Mr. Speaker, would want to benefit by actually getting maximum returns for coffee, tea, among other products that are actually grown in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, this is our country. This finance bill attempts to raise 289 to around 300 billion. Mr. Speaker, how then do we raise these programs, Mr. Speaker, and all the people of Kenya, regardless of where they live, whether they live in Azimio zones, they require roads, they require medicine, they require fertilizer, they require programs to lift their lives. How else do we finance and grow the economy of this country? The people of Kenya must be able to sacrifice a little bit so that we can finance our programs, finance our budgets, using our own resources, not the resources borrowed from the white people, Mr. Speaker. Enough is enough. We must grow our economy using our own resources and using ourselves, Mr. Speaker. We must be able to contribute. Azimio people do not live outside Kenya. They live in Kenya together with all of us. And we must know that this is our country and we must work together, pull up resources, provide solutions rather than attacking everything in this finance, Mr. Speaker. Let us provide solutions for the welfare of the people of Kenya, because this is our country and we can.
Adan Kainan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've had the opportunity to work with President Moi, President Kibaki, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and right now President William Ruto, Mr. Speaker. And we must all accept that we have a beautiful country called Kenya, Mr. Speaker, which all of us as individuals, as groups, must accept and believe in. Mr. Speaker, the issue of budget making, I know, is emotive, it is difficult, it's painful. And I must say from the onset that as a member of the Finance Committee, we have had the honest task, Mr. Speaker, of going through the different presentations by different groups from different sectors of our economy, Mr. Speaker, in pursuit of both their collective or individual rights, Mr. Speaker, because Kenya is a democracy. Every individual has the right to a divergent view, Mr. Speaker, and that is why in the minds of the framers of the current Constitution, Mr. Speaker, the right to public participation is enshrined in the Constitution. But Mr. Speaker, having said this, I want each one of us as the leadership, and being the leadership and being in this August House, Mr. Speaker, is a privilege. Because out of the 50 million Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans in their own wisdom have decided to have a few of us here as their representatives, Mr. Speaker. And we want to reflect. And I want to ask each one of you a question without venturing into your political persuasion. Where were we in 1963? Where did our forefathers expect us to be? And where are we today? And what is expected each one of us to do so that Kenya joins the League of Developed Nations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this country has recently been voted as one of the best in human resource capital, meaning therefore outside there, in the eyes of the international community, there are many Kenyans who have gone to school. Our task as elected representatives is to give them opportunities to get jobs, is to give them opportunities to remove them from that ladder of being underemployed and unemployed, Mr. Speaker. How is this achievable? This is achievable only through taxation, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say this. Today we expected, and I know we have my friends here, in our democracy we have two sides. Today we expected, what I expected, and this will have guided me, is to get an alternative tax proposals from those who are opposed to what the government is doing. It is not there. We expected to see an alternative budget proposal. We are not seeing it, Mr. Speaker. What is there, Mr. Speaker, is a government elected by the people of Kenya implementing their manifesto, Mr. Speaker, and therefore denying them the right to pursue their manifesto, Mr. Speaker, is an infringement of both their rights as individuals, as government, Mr. Speaker, and even to the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say this as a member of the Finance Committee, having gone through this, and having said taxation is a painful thing, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the finance bill as it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you have been around as a person of immense institutional memory, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, look at the missed opportunities. This country, because of the fear of the unknown, we have stagnated. We have lost our stature as an economic hub. It's simply because we sit somewhere there. Look at what is happening to the GDP of Ethiopia. Look at what is happening to the GDP of Tanzania. Look at what is happening to the GDP of Uganda. Where do you want to place Kenya, Mr. Speaker? It's because we have persuaded ourselves that it's not us to do the right thing. Somebody else must come. It's our time to say this country requires development, Mr. Speaker. It's our time to say, as members of the 13th Parliament, what the government is proposing, bring the alternative. And let me tell you this for free. What you have been asked to do is to deny the government taxes, misinform the Kenyan public so that your regime becomes unpopular and collapses. Don't accept that truth. This government must function. This government has been elected democratically by the people of Kenya. And therefore, 1 month ago, Mr. Speaker, the salary is delayed. You saw the kind of picketing that was going on. I'm sure in your office, you have had Molongos, ya watu kuuliza mishahara. Isn't it? Where will the government generate the money from? The government must generate the money from taxations, through this bill. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, what I want to say is this. We have a country. This country must move on. This is the final takeoff for the Republic of Kenya. And please.
Lote. Okay, give him a minute.
Is not cowardice. It's part of our democracy. Let's debate. This is a debating chamber. Let's not shout at each other. And I always say this as a practitioner. Let's debate. The majority will have their way, while the minority will have had their say. And that is the essence of democracy. Pass this bill as recommended by the finance bill. I support.
Titus Lote from Kacheliba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to contribute to the finance bill. Mr. Speaker, as a member of this respected house, and also a member of the society that has a mental capacity to think, I want to contribute as follows to this bill, Mr. Speaker. Far from it, Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of information that has gone to the public that this bill is supposed to be punitive to Kenyans. But having looked through it, Mr. Speaker, I realized that this bill is trying to address the inefficiency that has been there in our tax regime, Mr. Speaker. We've actually been collecting very little amount of revenue vis-a-vis the capacity that we have and this bill is not as punitive as we are told. I've looked through this bill, Mr. Speaker, and I've realized that only 3 main taxes have been introduced, and the rest have actually been made efficient. The first one, Mr. Speaker, is the digital monetization of the digital content. And this is in regards to the principle of taxation, Mr. Speaker, where taxation is supposed to be as evolving as possible in regards to respond to the evolving nature of our society. When our tax regime was done, Mr. Speaker, there was very little in terms of digital content. And because Kenyans are embracing the digital content very quickly, our tax regime is also supposed to embrace. And so, introducing the 15% on the digital content, Mr. Speaker, is in regards to the evolvement of this. This is very nice, Mr. Speaker, because we've actually seen our revenue falling because a lot of advertisements, a lot of our contents are actually becoming digital. And so the mother of our taxation is also reducing because we cannot now net in the traditional taxes. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is important that we actually also go along with the digital migration. The other tax that I've seen as new is the club entrance fee, Mr. Speaker. Initially, this club entrance fee was free, and it is only for the privileged, Mr. Speaker. The club members that are sitting here are paying hundreds of thousands to millions to clubs, and yet they are supposed to be exempted. There is no common man, there is no common person that actually benefits from this. I actually love the fact that we need supposed to introduce a tax to this club so that we net in these people that are actually in clubs, clubbing and using a lot of money and want to be exempted. The other one, Mr. Speaker, is the introduction of the 5% withholding tax on advertisement. Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of diseases that are coming to this country because advertising has become so cheap that people are misleading Kenyans. We've actually seen people being conned. We've seen people buying products that are not necessary because there is no tax on advertising. Mr. Speaker, introducing a 5% withholding tax on this will actually safeguard Kenyans from the conmen that are actually advertising if they are allowed to advertise for free. Finally, if I go to the housing, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this country, we host the 3 main out of 10 slums in Africa. And until we actually agree to say we want to move out of the slums, we will continue premising and saying that we are not ready. We should be ready as now, Mr. Speaker. We want to move from being a country that is living in slums to a country that is supposed now to be a developed country. Mr. Speaker, if I look at the superhighway, the Thika superhighway, if I look at the SGR, I look at the Nairobi Expressway, everybody in this country, the people of Kachaliba contributed to it, Mr. Speaker, and yet they don't use it on everyday basis. So even this housing, we are all supposed to contribute to it because at the end of it all, when Kenyans get houses, whether you get it or not, it is for the common good of this country. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me a chance to speak to this bill. And I first of all start by congratulating the Committee on Finance for the tedious and good work that they did, and even all the way to calling out the public participation. Mr. Speaker, sir, yesterday we concluded on the Committee on Supply on the budget. And we were able to adopt and to pass this, Mr. Speaker. And therefore today, we are discussing the finance bill, which is supposed to look for money to finance to run this budget, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I failed to understand how yesterday we can be able to pass the bill on the Committee of Supply, and today we start going against on how to finance it. Mr. Speaker, sir, our budget of 3.6
7 trillion must be financed by the people of this Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, sir, let us not go out and not be realistic and even play politics, populist politics, to tell our people that we are against the finance bill just because there is the taxation. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no other way that we can be able to finance our budget other than through the taxation. Mr. Speaker, all of us, we understand that the cost of living is not good to all of us. We also understand that there is the debt that was left by the last regime, Mr. Speaker. We also understand there is unemployment and so many other. And therefore, as a government, we must look into how we are going to focus on areas to stimulate the economic growth and reduce the cost of living among other development measures that are awaited by our people. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm surprised to see the Azimio coalition standing up and going against this finance bill. Yet all the time we see the government officers visiting their areas. Every stand up with a mic to request for a load. Another one requesting for the installation of electricity in their rural areas, the constituencies. They also speak a lot about the health. They speak a lot and to so many other areas. My question today, how do we finance for all the requests that you put? And that time you are taking the mic to ask that. It is so that your people can hear that you are really asking from the government so that they may get the development. That time you are happy when you hear the crabs that you have made your day. You have made your political marriage. But when we come here to look for money to finance this development, you are here standing up and talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My dear, let us be optimistic that for this government to deliver, we must go for the taxation. We are against for more loans because, Mr. Speaker, sir, for whatever we have not been able to pay. You have heard from the budget committee, they are saying 60% of our finances that we have is going to finance the loans. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is only 40% that is being left for the development and also for the recurrence. So, Mr. Speaker, we must struggle to make sure whatever our people are waiting for, we look for it, and it can only come from the taxation. And we are taxing those who are employed. We are taxing those who are in business. We are taxing those who have. Let us not incite our people who do not have when we are trying to create some employment and some areas that they can be able to employ themselves so that they can also be able to put food on their table. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no one here who came to this plenary without taking breakfast. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also going to take lunch. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also going to enjoy good supper or dinners. Mr. Speaker, sir, the people that we are looking for do not have anything to put on their table. They are not even able to give clothing and other needed measures that are required to their children. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we must realize this. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to speak a little onto the housing fund. We have really put a lot of politics when it.
Time is up. Memusi Kanjori.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also contribute to this finance bill. And Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying I oppose the finance bill, and I really pity with my colleagues from Kenya Kwanza because they are really trying to justify something that they also know will not fly in their villages. Mr. Speaker, this is a draconian and backward way of collecting revenue from our people. Honorable Speaker, as representatives of the people, I want to hear one member of parliament whose people come to him to ask for a house. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, where the executive has been informed that the priority of Kenyans is houses, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, please protect me. Mr. Speaker,
Order, honorable members. I'll protect you, also avoid unhelpful provocations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The proposal, Mr. Speaker, to collect 2,500 shillings and targeting 3 million Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, that is collecting 7.5 billion shillings a month. Honorable Speaker, 7.5 billion shillings a month. If this money was proposed to be put in education, which is an area that most of our people are in need of, if this 7.5 billion shillings was put in education, I would gladly contribute 2,500 shillings. And Mr. Speaker, the impact that that money would have, 7.5 billion, if that money was given to 290 constituencies, which these members of parliament represent, each constituency will get over 25 million shillings a month. That is something that if was proposed, we would gladly support. Because, Mr. Speaker, our people need certain basic things, food being one of them. Honorable Speaker, the money that Kenyans contribute to NHIF, for example, the money that Kenyans contribute to NSSF, NHIF right now is broke. It cannot pay its expenses. NSSF, people are retiring and cannot be given their pension. You want to come and tell people who are already seeing misappropriation of money to continue contributing. Mr. Speaker, this is wrong. I see a lot of insensitivity in this government. I see a lot of cluelessness. And Mr. Speaker, let me say this. The unfortunate thing, when the UDA administration was campaigning, they appealed to the people who are desperate in this country. They appealed to the so-called hustlers. But, Mr. Speaker, the first opportunity that this government had to show that they really meant what they said, this is the first budget that they are bringing. This first opportunity that they have, they've squandered it. They've squandered it, Mr. Speaker, because the first thing that I would have wanted to see is how the loopholes of corruption will be sealed, how wastage will be sealed by this government. Mr. Speaker, if we cannot continue affording a budget of over 3 trillion shillings, what is wrong with us saying that this country can only finance 2.1 trillion shillings and not tax Kenyans to death? Mr. Speaker, I oppose. Thank you.
Mishimbogo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I want to strongly oppose this finance bill. Honorable Speaker, a formula of taxation which is going to burden the Kenyans and increase the cost of living, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, increasing the fuel levy to 16%, it means the cost of production is going to be high, the cost of transportation is going to be high. It will also affect agriculture because agriculture depends on machinery and the machinery also depends on diesel and petrol power.
Order,
Honorable Speaker.
Order, Mishimbogo, you will have 4.5 minutes. You will be the first in the afternoon. Members, you may rise. It's now 1 o'clock. We'll take a lunch break and resume at 2:30.